Hello, my name is Stephen Thomas and welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to get started working with agent loops inside of Logic Apps. Agent loops is a brand new feature recently added to Logic Apps. It is currently in public preview. Keep that in mind as you take a look at the demo video, as the look and feel may have changed since the release of this video. What we're going to do in this video is create a basic AI agent and allow this agent to execute tools inside of our Logic app. These tools could be pre-built connectors provided by Microsoft, third-party connectors, or even HTTP calls. We're going to see all three of those in our example. I'm going to walk you through setting up everything from the large language model to setting up the standard edition Logic app, all in Azure. If you've never done any of this before, I'm going to walk you through it step by step. If you have done these things before, use the chapter markers below to jump to the content that you're interested in learning about. I'm excited to introduce you to this new feature and help you build AI agents inside of Logic Apps. With that, let's jump into our code and let's build our first AI agent in Logic Apps.
Okay, so let's jump in and get started creating our first Logic App standard using the new agent loop AI agent component. Now, I've outlined here the steps we're going to walk through in this step-by-step example today. Now, do remember that this is in public preview, so depending on when you're watching this video, some of the look and feel or even some of these steps might be a little bit different than what you see here. Now, I am going through step by step. If you have some of these components already created, feel free to use the chapter links below in the video to jump to the section that you're most interested in. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started first off creating our Azure OpenAI components that we're going to use. In this case, we're going to create a GPT 4.1 model that we're going to use for our agent. Now there is a cost for that, and I will go through that in more detail when we get there. Then we're going to go ahead and create our standard edition Logic app. We're going to create a brand new app service plan, and there is a cost for that as well, which I'll outline in more detail in a moment. Then we're going to go ahead and plan our agent. The plan for this agent is going to play a game, a card game. And this is high card wins card game with a number of players, 2 players, 3 players. You can determine how many players we want. We'll start off with 2 players in this demo. And when doing this, we're going to do a series of steps. Now, it might kind of feel like a workflow because we're kind of defining steps here hierarchically, but this is really just to give you hands-on experience with building some of these agents. I hope that you will take what we have here and expand upon that. I'm going to do a video later where I do expand upon this, make it so that it's totally dynamic on what card game you're playing and the number of players. So all that is pretty cool, and we'll see that in a later video. So for now, this feels kind of like a workflow, but we are using the agent framework. So first we're going to do is we're going to shuffle the deck, then we're going to draw a card for each player. It is dynamic, so it can have a dynamically changing number of players. And then we're going to go ahead and email the results of the game to see who won to a set email address. That's kind of the plan. Once we now we talked about the plan, we'll go in and we'll go ahead and create the agent instructions. This will tell the agent what to do, and then we'll go about building the agent inside of our Logic app. In this demo, while we are getting an email with the results, I am going to use HTTP request response. I found that especially when these agents are intended to kind of run autonomously on their own, that HTTP response is very helpful. Every once in a while, the agent, I won't say gets hung up, but is asking for additional input. And hopefully it does that when we run this. That's kind of the thing of these live demos. You never know what's really going to happen with these AI agents, but hopefully we do get it kind of hung up so you can see the value in this response message, and then we'll go back and tweak our instructions to account for that. So that's something I found when working with this agent loop, is that this request response pattern for the autonomous agents is very beneficial. And then we're going to go about and test that. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into our Azure portal and get started with building our OpenAI component. Okay, now I simply just jumped over to Chrome, and I want to walk through a few things about Azure pricing, just so you know what this stuff is going to cost you when you come out and build this. Obviously, if you have MSDN credits, that's a great use of your MSDN credits here. But if you are on pay-per-use, I want to make sure you understand the pricing. We are going to use an OpenAI service. Now, creating the service itself, we create the S0 plan, so that is going to be a consumption-based plan. And there's several different options here. by no means going to dive into anything in detail on the OpenAI components of everything, but we are going to use the standard S0 component pay per use, and it's going to be a global deployment of the global SKU. But we do want to look at the pricing here. We are going to also create our components in the East US2 region. That's quite simply because not all the models are available in all the regions. Before I jump, let's jump over here. This is the best way to look at that. I'll put a link to this in the blog post that accompanies this video, as well as in the video description below. But this is the global standard model availability. I found that creating your OpenAI service in the region that you want to host your model in just makes everything a lot easier. You can do it a couple of different ways. Just seems to get a little more complex. So we want to use this ChatGPT 4.1 model, and we're going to do that in the East 2 region. So we are going to go ahead and set that up here. So over here, I've selected East US 2, and then you can see a set of pricing options here. Now you're charged per token when you're dealing with AI models. In general, each pass through our agent loops is going to be maybe 10,000 tokens each silo. So you can get a sense that maybe each run is going to be, it could be maybe up to 50,000 tokens depending on the loops that everything passes through. So this token cost per 1 million tokens can matter. We're going to jump down here and we're going to look at this 4.1, and it's going to be $2 per 1 million input tokens. The output tokens are much smaller and they are more expensive to account for that. Now, all of our context window is going to count towards that input token size. So we'll see quickly how you can adjust that in the agent loop, but we're just going to leave everything at default. The intent is not to run this again and again. But I do want to point out that if you were to select like the GPT-4.5 model, for example, significantly more expensive at $75 and $150 for input and output tokens. So your model choice is going to impact your pricing, and it can be pretty significant. So we're going to go ahead and create these components now. The only thing I've pre-created in this whole demo here is this resource group. So I'm going to go into my resource group. It is in the East US 2. So I'm going to go ahead and create resource. And I want to do OpenAI. And let's go ahead and select Azure OpenAI and create that. And going to pre-populate all this. I do want to select the East 2 region. That's kind of silly that it changed that to regular East. And I'm going to give this a name, OpenAI Live Demo 0519. And then my pricing tier is going to be my standard. It's the only option that I have that I can select. And I'm going to go ahead and say next. And here I'm just going to leave this to all networks so in open internet, anybody can access this. Hit next, next, and hit create. Now this does take just a few moments to provision, generally 3 or 4 minutes. So I'm just going to pause the video and jump back here in just a second. Okay, now that is completed, I simply am going to click Go to Resource, and this is going to jump us into our landing page for our resource. Everything is configured in the AI Foundry portal, so I'm simply going to click this link. It's going to follow me through to my portal. Now this will take just a moment to load. Now I'm not going to go into this in any detail here. We do want to check to make sure over here on the right that we are in our newly provisioned live demo component of AI Foundry, and that we are in East US 2 region. Now it says there's nothing I can do in the playground because I don't have any deployments. I simply click Create a Deployment. And here's my different options here that I can create. There's 17 different models I can choose from. Now outside of OpenAI, we could have a whole multi-hour demo on just how to use this AI Foundry. So we're not going to dive into these specifics in much detail other than to say we want this chat 4.1 here, and just going to say confirm. And here's going to provide some customizations. And this is where you can get into if you have other components already deployed to OpenAI, you could run into quota limits and stuff like that. This is definitely the most challenging piece I've ran into when working with the Logic App agent components, was kind of dealing with the quotas and setting up the right regions to get these models to run in. So something to keep in mind, you can customize things here. You have a total number of tokens that you can allocate across what appears to be multiple components in your subscription. So I'm just going to leave this at default here. And if you weren't in the same region as your model deployment, it would create like a new little AI Foundry little sub-region in somewhere else. Like I ended up with a bunch of stuff in Sweden. So not necessarily intuitive that happens. So just kind of keep in mind if you see that or run into quota problems, kind of go back and check your regions and see what type of deployment you're trying to do. So it's just like that created. We'll double check down here in deployments and make sure our ChatGPT 4.1 is deployed and everything looks good with that. So we're going to use these components we just created now inside our standard edition logic app. So from this point, let's jump back to our portal and let's go back to our resource group that we were just in here. And the next step, let's go ahead and create our standard edition logic app. Okay, so to create our logic app, I'm going to come up here to create and type in logic app and go ahead create. And we want to do the workflow service plan. Do select. I'm going to give it a name, logic app AI live demo. I want to put this in East US 2 just to be consistent. Now here I don't have an existing app service plan, so I'm going to go ahead and create one. Right there, it's going to create a new one. Now there is a cost to this as well. This is about 25 cents per hour that this app service plan runs. Now there's no way to turn this off. So when it's created, it's going to charge us until we delete it. So if you don't have one of these running today, go ahead and create one for this demo as you work through it. And then in a couple hours when you're done with this demo, you can save your JSON, the workflow that you've created if you want to use it again later. But you would want to go in and delete this app service plan that we're going to create. That way you're not going to be charged for it. So with that, keep that in mind. There's going to be a storage cost associated with as well. It's going to be minimal. And we'll go ahead to networking. We're going to leave networking as default. Monitoring, I do want to go ahead and turn off my app insight. By default, is going to select that. I'm not concerned with that for this demo. And go to tags and go ahead and review and create. Now this is going to go ahead and initialize that app service plan for us and go ahead and create our baseline logic app standard that we're going to use. Now while this is deploying, I will point out, so a logic app in standard edition is kind of a top level container. So inside that logic app, you can have multiple workflows. So we are going to create this top level container, and now we're going to dive in and create a new workflow for our agent. So I'm going to give this just a few moments to create this here, and I'm going to jump back when this is done. Okay, that's complete. So now I'm just going to click go to resource, and this is going to take me right into that standard edition logic app. Sure enough, it is running in East US 2, just like we requested. So let's jump over here to workflows, and I want to add a new workflow. And what you'll see here is this brand new agent preview. This wasn't there just a few days ago, and if you don't see that here, then something must be wrong. So you'll want to make sure that you do see this agent preview here. We're going to go ahead and select that. And I'm going to say this is our live demo and say create. And this happens really quickly. It's going to take just a moment. And if you don't see it here, simply do refresh. And there's your agent. And let's dive into this. So this is going to pre-populate for you with the default agent. So this is the agent loop that we're going to be working with. Here we can define our triggers just like we can any other logic app. Before I really get started with this, let's click on this agent loop and take a look at what we have here. So there's some parameters that we're going to have to set on this agent loop. First off, it's this deployment model name, which I'm going to go back through these and set these in just a moment. I'm going to talk about them first. Deployment model name we're going to set here. I think currently this only is going to support OpenAI components. Unsure how that will change or impact later, but we have that there. Here's our instructions for our agent. So this is agent-wide instructions for what we want that agent to do. Here's our user instructions, which is going to be specific to that actual user interaction there. And then we have some other advanced parameters here, which we'll just take a look at some of these things that we have to set. So one setting to point out here is the max tokens. I think this is going to default to 8,000. Now, if you went in here and set this to something like 50, you definitely get very drastically different results. So the default 8,000 is where we're going to leave it, and that's going to be 8,000 per pass of the agent, so every execution, and we'll see as it does different things, it's going to recall into our AI model, and that's going to be up to 8,000 tokens per call. Some other things here, we can set penalties on for temperature, stuff like this. These are things we won't get into in our getting started demo here. So for now, we'll just focus on that. The one thing I do want to point out is this channel setting. This is something new that we've not experienced before in Logic Apps. Default is going to be do not allow channels. That's going to be an autonomous agent that's going to run without the expectation of any interaction from the user. You can set both input and output channels or input only channels. And these are going to be very beneficial for human in the loop scenarios where you want to have interaction and get input from other folks about what you want to have happen in your agent. These are a little bit more challenging to set up, so we're just going to focus on this autonomous card playing agent that we want to build here. So we're going to set do not allow channels. Now we'll see, hopefully we see that this isn't always right. Sometimes we will get asked for input, and that's part of the request response setup that we're going to see here and how we're going to account for that. So, but for now, do not allow channels. Parameters, let's jump over to our parameters. So let's get to our first parameter here, the deployment model name. I want to click connect, so I'm going to actually connect to this. I want to give this a meaningful name. I'm going to say AI Con East 2 and GP East 2. So it's going to connect to my OpenAI component. I could have multiple models deployed in there, so I don't want this to be model specific. I'm going to use URL key based, and here I can actually select what subscription I want to pull this from, and it's going to auto populate this for me. I'm going to select here my correct subscription, and then go ahead and select my OpenAI resource. We have several different ones here from past demos that I've created. I want this new one that we created, this OpenAI one here. Now, I can also from this point here click create new. It's going to take us into that same OpenAI experience that we did at the first part of this demo and just allow you to create that resource here. If you go this route, create that there, make sure you come back and hit this refresh here so it repopulates this, or toggle your subscriptions if you have multiple subscriptions so that it will auto-populate the parameters below. Once that's set, I'm going to say create new, and it's going to create that connection for me. And if all goes well, we will see our GPT model here in our dropdown. If you do not see your GPT model here in this dropdown, you'll have to go back to your OpenAI service and see what's going on with your setup of your model. That could be because you have a mismatch between regions and you selected the wrong OpenAI component back in your dropdown. So it gets a little confusing. Just as long as your region and your model deployment match, should see everything here just fine. So I'm going to select that. Now let's talk about where we're at and kind of our steps for our process here. We've went through step 1 and 2, creating OpenAI, creating our standard logic app. We talked about the plan for our agent, about how we want to plan that. We kind of know what we're going to do. But before we start adding tools into our agent loop, let's write the instructions for our agent. Let's talk about what we want this agent to do. Now, I've pre-created a set of instructions for us. Just got them here. And this is just thrown out there, not very well formatted, kind of done this on purpose so we can take a look at how to format this better. But this is just in plain English of what I want to have happen. So you can read this as you see fit. Go ahead and pause the video, but I'm just going to go ahead and pop this in here and put that as our agent instructions. And then for user instructions, I could pass this in through our HTTP call, like the number of players, but I'm just going to say number of players is 2. And that will tell us how many players we have for this execution of the agent. So now after I've defined this, let's go ahead and add our tools to our agent. So the tools is how we tell our agent to do things, and we don't have to define them in any particular order. That's the beauty of this. The agent will define the order for us. So we talked about a few different things that we want to have happen as part of this agent. And the first thing we talked about is shuffling a card deck. So over here. So these tools can really be anything. As I start adding these tools, they can be any of the 1,400 connectors that are available. And when I was thinking of what would make a good demo, I quite simply opened the connector list and went through top to bottom and went through all 1,300 connectors and said, hey, what would really make a good demo? And a lot of times you'll see maybe a demo of the weather or places, things to do in a city or destination. And I said, let's make it a card game. So let's go ahead, and there was a connector for dealing cards. So I said, let's do a deck of cards. So deck of cards, independent publisher, no API key needed. Very simple to work with. First thing we're going to do is we're going to shuffle the new card deck. And you can dive into the documentation if you want to learn more about kind of the specifics of this, but we're simply just going to add a new connection there. There are some advanced parameters here. Deck count, I'm just going to set it to 1. It does support up to like 6 decks. So if you're doing blackjack, generally there'd be a 6-deck shoe. So you could do things like that. I'm just going to set this to 1. And if you look in the documentation, what this does is return you a deck ID. And that deck ID is going to be used then for drawing cards to ensure that you're drawing from the same deck of cards each time. So I'm going to leave that at 1. And up here under my tooling, I'm going to be a little specific. So I wanted to call this shuffle new deck. And oh, I didn't like that, so it has to be unique. So shuffle deck of cards. And then I want to add a description for what's going to happen here. So this will shuffle a new deck of cards and return a deck ID. Now we'll talk about agent parameters in just a moment. So after we shuffle the deck of cards, we're going to want to draw cards from that deck. Now there is a connector for that, but I want to show how to do it if we just call the API directly. So to do that, we're just going to make an HTTP call to their API. And what we want to do here is call this draw cards. And what we'll say here is something like for a given deck ID, draw the number of cards needed for each player to play the game. Now, a few things to point out here is it's very forgiving about spelling. AI in general is very forgiving about spelling, which is fantastic for me because I'm not a very good speller. So one thing we can point out here is, I have Grammarly, so it should tell me if things are spelled wrong, but every once in a while it misses some things, and AI just seems to be okay with that. One thing was when I was testing out this demo, I kept getting kind of some odd results, and I kept asking for a deck of cards. So once I corrected that to be a deck of cards, then I started to get some different results. So if you happen to spell something wrong and the AI interprets it incorrectly, then you could get some different results. So, but in general, it seems to be very forgiving about spelling. So I'm going to have my deck of cards there. Now I have the URL here of the API that I want to call. There is no authentication needed, so it's just simply the URL, and it is going to be just a GET request. Now, there's 2 different parameters here that we need to pass in. Now, for this tool, we actually need these parameters passed in from the agent. So we need to tell the agent that we're expecting it to pass in parameters here, and we do that by these agent parameters over here on the right. Now, I can create these automatically over here by highlighting the text I want to put a parameter in and select this new option that we have here, this little robot icon or agent icon, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to say create new parameter, and it's going to be the deck ID. And it's going to be type string, and I'm going to say here deck ID. I'm going to say create, and then I want to have a count here. And just like I did before, I'm going to add a new parameter and call this number of cards to draw. And this type is going to be integer. I'm going to call it the same thing. Say create. And just like that, now it's dynamically building our query string, which is pretty cool, based on the parameters that the AI agent is going to supply. So I'm going to simply click out of that. I'm going to jump back in here. that pane on the right didn't auto refresh, but you can see my deck ID, number of cards to draw, automatically populated for us. Nothing else we need to do there. Now, the last thing I wanted to do is send that email. This is an optional step, but we'll go ahead and create that here. And I want to do Office 365, send an email. And I have to sign in. This will take just a moment. And use my account that's already signed in. And in this case, I'm going to just send it to a statically defined address. And in this case, I want to define the subject and body that I pass in. So I want them to be agent parameters. Normally, I'd probably have the email address as an agent parameter as well. This case, I'm not. So again, I'm going to come back over here, create my agent parameters. And this is going to be the subject of string. Say create. Oops, put it in the wrong spot. And select subject, and then come over here and select our body. New parameter like we did last time. Oh, we'll just leave the default. Sound pretty good there. So that looks great. This is going to send our email. So now just like that, we have kind of completed our agent definition that we want to have here. We've added 3 separate tools doing 3 totally separate different things. And now I need to add how I'm going to call this agent. So I'm going to have my trigger be an HTTP call. So it's going to be a simple request. I'm not going to pass in anything. This is just going to be a HTTP get. And then I want to return a response here. Now, what I found is that even though this is an autonomous agent, it's going to run without our interaction, and it will send an email with our results, which is fantastic. Every once in a while, it might get hung up on saying, hey, you're sending an email. I need to supply an email address, even though it's a static email. And we say in the text that, hey, you don't need to supply an email. So that's one thing that could happen. Other things could happen when dealing cards. Who knows what could happen. So I like to return this body here, especially for testing the autonomous agents. And I want to return a parameter. And there's this parameter here called last assistant message. And this will tell me kind of where it's at in the process. So if it is kind of hung up and saying, hey, I want an email address, this will tell me right away in this call here, and I don't have to go back into the logic app, runtime history, and view this. You definitely can, but this just kind of makes it a lot easier, and it's definitely useful in testing. So I'm going to leave that here. And now we've defined everything we have in our logic app. Let's go ahead and save this. Nope, it gave me an error here. Let's check a look at that error. Description of tool 3 is required. Oops, I didn't describe a description here. So this tool will send an email. It needs to be passed in subject and body of the email. And I'm going to call this send email. Okay, so that was very useful. Let's try saving again. And this time we saved successfully. And let's go ahead and grab this URL. So I noticed that the URL is not populated there. To get that, I'm just going to jump out of the designer, jump back in. And now back in the designer, I'm going to grab that HTTP URL. We're going to use this for testing in Postman. So with that, let's open up Postman and test out our agent loop logic app. Now over in Postman, we just paste the URL that we copied from our logic app. And since it's just a get, I just go ahead and hit submit, and it should execute our agent. Now, it generally takes 15 to 20 seconds or so to execute the agent in my experience. And since we are doing the request response, we would expect to get the response back, and it is going to be that last agent message. And you can see here, cards have been drawn. Player 1 got 9 of spades. Player 2 got ace of clubs. Sadly, player 2 wins the round with an ace and sent an email. So let me go check my email. And I'll pull up my email here, and sure enough, here's the email that I got from the agent. And you can see the 9 of spades and the ace of clubs. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and try this again just to see what we get the second time. And what I tend to notice is the first time always seems to work much better than I expect it to. And then the second time or third time is when it starts to come out with some problems. So let's see what it says here. Everything seemed to work great, and we got an email just like we did before. Okay, so with that, let's jump back and take a look again at our agent instructions. While we were happy and everything seems to work fine with these agent instructions, I kind of showed them here as a way to kind of not do it. You want to see your agent instructions structured and organized much better than this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this into Gemini and simply tell it to update these agent instructions and make them cleaner and crisper. So let me show you how we would go about doing that. I have a header message here that I'm just going to paste the top here that basically tells the AI, it doesn't have to be Gemini, it could be anybody that you choose, ChatGPT or anybody, what you're expecting it to do. So I'm just going to paste this into one of our favorite chat apps, and then let's see what comes back from that. So give me just a moment, and I will paste what I got back here in just a second. Okay, let's paste those results. And what you can see here is that these instructions are much more detailed and much cleaner than what I had came up with originally. And it applies, talks about the rules of high card wins and everything about how the email should be structured and stuff like that. Makes it look a lot more detailed. So let's go ahead and paste this into our Logic app. And now if you wanted to, you could have the system instructions be loaded dynamically as well. Like you could pull them from Azure storage so that you could update these at any time without impacting any running processes. So just going to go ahead and save this again. And let's go ahead and run our process again. And we would expect it to work just the same way as it did before. Now, if there was a problem in the processing, if the agent needed more instruction, you would get that feedback right here. By us returning that last agent message, what I found is sometimes it'll be sitting there saying, hey, I really need an email address, even though we've already supplied it. And so the results are back now. You can see it just structured a little better, a little cleaner, a little easier to read. And let's see, sure enough, I got my email. And the email is very clear. It says a little crisper, a little more organized around, just looks better overall, right? Because we're passing in better instructions. So with that, kind of concludes our first look at Azure agents using Logic App agent loops. Excited to be sharing this with you and hope you all get in there and can build this out yourself. Now, from a cost perspective, the model that we created, that's pay per use. So you can go ahead and leave that up. It shouldn't have much impact, if any, on cost. But our Logic App runtime environment, that is pay per hour. So you will continue to be charged for that until you go ahead and delete that app service plan that we created in the beginning. So go ahead and delete that if you don't want to be charged. Now you can go ahead and expand on this and make it play any game that you would like. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Stay tuned to my channel for more videos related to Logic App agent loops coming soon. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.